Depends. Sad, that type of thing.
Oh, really? It brings back sad feelings for you?
Well, good and bad. It's sort of a beautiful sadness, I guess you could say.
3 years after Lisa Marie Presley's death, she is still making headlines. This time, not because of her father's legacy, but because of a private diary discovered after her passing. In its pages, she reportedly revealed startling things she witnessed while living with Elvis Presley. Why did she keep them hidden? The hidden family life of Elvis Presley. On the first day of February 1968, a baby girl was born at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. Her name was Lisa Marie Presley. She arrived exactly 9 months after the wedding of her parents, Elvis and Priscilla Presley. To the outside world, she was not just another child. She was the only daughter of the most famous entertainer on the planet. For Elvis, Lisa Marie's birth was one of the happiest moments of his life. He had already achieved a level of fame that few people could imagine. Crowds followed him everywhere. His records sold by the millions. His face appeared in newspapers across the world. Yet becoming a father brought him a different kind of joy, one that fame could never provide. Those closest to the family often described Elvis as a loving and playful father. Whenever he was home, he wanted to spend time with his daughter. At Graceland, the large Memphis estate that had become his private sanctuary, Lisa Marie was the center of his world. Away from cameras and screaming fans, Elvis was simply a dad enjoying precious moments with his little girl. He carried her through the halls of Graceland, showed her around the sprawling mansion, and spoiled her with gifts. She was allowed to explore parts of the estate that felt magical through the eyes of a child. The grand rooms, the long staircases, and the endless grounds became her playground. Graceland itself seemed like a world apart from ordinary life. Protected by gates and surrounded by loyal staff, it felt almost like a private kingdom. Inside those walls, Elvis tried to create a safe and happy home for his daughter. Despite his fame, he wanted her childhood to be filled with love, laughter, and family. Priscilla shared the same goal. Together, she and Elvis worked to give Lisa Marie as normal a life as possible. It was not an easy task. Very few children grew up with a father whose every move attracted worldwide attention. Yet they tried to protect her from the pressures that came with being an Elvis Presley. For Lisa Marie, her earliest years were filled with affection. She adored her father, and he adored her. Their bond formed quickly and deeply. Whenever he was around, she naturally gravitated toward him. He made her feel special, protected, and loved. To many people looking from the outside, the Presley family seemed to have everything. They lived in luxury. They were admired by millions. They appeared blessed with success, wealth, and happiness. But behind the beautiful image, small cracks were beginning to appear. The demands of fame never truly disappeared. Even inside Graceland, the outside world constantly pressed against the family. Tours, recordings, business obligations, and endless public attention made normal family life difficult. Elvis belonged not only to his wife and daughter, but also to millions of fans who wanted a piece of him. As Lisa Marie grew older, changes slowly began to take shape around her. She was still very young and could not fully understand what was happening, but she could sense that things were not always as perfect as they seemed. The marriage between Elvis and Priscilla was becoming strained. The pressures that came with fame, long separations, and different lifestyles were creating distance between them. Although they continued to care deeply for their daughter, the relationship that had once seemed so strong was beginning to weaken. Years later, accounts linked to Lisa Marie's personal reflections suggested that even as a child, she sometimes felt that something around her family was changing. She could not explain it. She only sensed that the atmosphere was different from before. Soon, the first signs of change would become impossible to ignore. Between two worlds. By the time Lisa Marie Presley was 4 years old, her life began to change in ways she could not fully understand. Her parents, Elvis and Priscilla Presley, separated, bringing an end to the family life she had always known. Although both remained devoted to their daughter, the separation created two very different worlds for her. After the split, Lisa spent most of her time with her mother in Los Angeles. Then came the moments she looked forward to most, her visits to Memphis. Every trip back to Graceland meant seeing her father again. No matter how much time passed between visits, the excitement never faded. Graceland was more than a house to her. It was the place where she felt closest to Elvis. Life in Los Angeles was different from life in Memphis. Los Angeles was where she lived with her mother and attended school. It offered a more structured routine. Graceland, however, felt larger than life. The mansion, the grounds, the familiar staff, and most importantly, her father, made every visit feel special. Even after the separation, Elvis continued to shower Lisa with affection. Whenever she arrived at Graceland, he was happy to see her. The bond between them remained strong. She was still the center of his attention whenever they were together. Yet, as the years passed, Lisa began noticing small changes around her father. At first, they were easy to miss. She was still very young. She did not understand the pressures that came with being one of the most famous people in the world. She did not understand health problems or the medications that adults sometimes relied on. She only knew that things felt different. During some visits, Elvis seemed more tired than she remembered. There were days when he appeared energetic and playful, just like before. On other days, he seemed exhausted. His mood could change unexpectedly. Sometimes he was cheerful and talkative. Other times, he seemed distant and withdrawn. As a child, Lisa could not explain these differences. She only noticed them. Over time, she also became aware that more people seemed to be surrounding her father. Staff members handled many parts of his daily life. They helped manage his schedule, his home, and his personal needs. Elvis had always relied on people around him, but their presence seemed to become even more important as time went on. Another change stood out to Lisa during her visits to Graceland. Doctors appeared more frequently. Men carrying medical bags entered the house and left again hours later. For a young girl, it was unusual, but no one offered detailed explanations. Years later, accounts connected to her personal reflections suggested that these visits stayed in her memory. She reportedly remembered doctors moving through Graceland on a regular basis. She also recalled seeing prescription medications in these different areas of the house. Medicine bottles became part of the scenery she encountered during some visits. They appeared on tables and other surfaces around the mansion. As a child, she did not know what the medications were for or why there seemed to be so many of them. She only knew that they were there. And as Lisa moved between her two homes, she began to realize something she could never fully explain. Every visit revealed a different Elvis. The father she loved seemed to be slowly slipping away right before her eyes. The king behind closed doors to the world, Elvis Presley was still the king of rock and roll. Fans filled arenas to see him perform. His name remained one of the most famous in entertainment. Wherever he went, people treated him like a living legend. Yet behind the gates of Graceland, a very different story was unfolding. For years, Elvis had lived under enormous pressure. Since his rise to fame, his life had been filled with recording sessions, concerts, movies, interviews, and endless public attention. Millions expected him to remain the same energetic performer they had always admired. Few people stopped to consider the toll that such a life could take on a person. By the middle of the 1970s, the demands of fame were becoming harder to carry. Elvis continued performing, but maintaining his schedule was becoming increasingly difficult. The physical and emotional strain of years spent in the spotlight was beginning to show. He was also dealing with ongoing health problems. Over time, doctors prescribed various medications to help manage different conditions. These medications became a regular part of his life. What may have started as treatment gradually became something much larger. Inside Graceland, the atmosphere slowly changed. The mansion that had once felt lively and carefree seemed more guarded than before. Conversations became quieter, certain topics were avoided. Staff members moved through the halls carrying out their duties. But many could see that Elvis was struggling. Those closest to him witnessed changes that became harder to ignore. His appearance often fluctuated. At times, he looked healthier and more energetic. At other times, he appeared tired and physically worn down. The differences could be noticeable even over short periods. His daily routine also became less predictable. There were days when he remained out of sight for long stretches. Hours passed behind closed doors. Sometimes he slept far longer than people expected. Other times, he stayed awake through the night. For young Lisa Marie, these changes were confusing. Whenever she visited Graceland, she was happy to see her father. Despite everything happening around him, Elvis remained deeply devoted to his daughter. When they spent time together, he often seemed more relaxed. The pressures that weighed on him appeared to fade, if only for a while. Lisa still saw the loving father she adored. Yet she could not ignore the strange things happening around her. The steady flow of doctors through Graceland added to the mystery. Medical visits became common enough that they no longer seemed unusual to those around Elvis. Whenever Lisa asked questions, adults often became protective. They reassured her without explaining very much. Their responses left her with more uncertainty than understanding. As time passed, the situation around Elvis seemed increasingly hidden from public view. Fans continued seeing the star on stage, but much of what happened behind the scenes remained private. Even those inside Graceland did not always know how serious his struggles had become. The secrecy created lasting questions. What exactly was happening behind closed doors? Why were so many medications involved? Did some people around Elvis unintentionally contribute to his decline by failing to challenge decisions that were harming him? These questions would remain part of the conversation long after his death. For Lisa Marie, however, the situation was far simpler and far more painful. She was not looking at a global icon. She was looking at her father. As the months passed, the signs of decline became harder to ignore. The concerns inside Graceland continued to grow, even as the outside world remained focused on the legend. Then came the summer of 1977, and with it, the final weeks that would change Lisa Marie's life forever. The morning Graceland fell silent. The summer of 1977 brought a sadness that would forever change the Presley family. What began as another day at Graceland ended as one of the most shocking moments in music history. For millions of fans around the world, it was the day they lost Elvis Presley. For Lisa Marie, it was the day she lost her father. On the evening of August 15th, Elvis was at Graceland preparing for an upcoming tour. Although he had been facing health problems, plans for future performances were still moving forward. Like many nights during that period of his life, he remained awake late into the night. Inside the mansion, everything appeared calm. Staff members carried out their duties while Elvis spent time in the house. The familiar routines of Graceland continued as they always had. No one knew that these would be the final hours of his life. As night turned into morning, Elvis remained awake. In the early hours of August 16th, he was still inside Graceland. At some point later that morning, concern began to spread through the house. Shortly after, Elvis was found unconscious on the floor of a bathroom in Graceland. The situation immediately became an emergency. People rushed to help him. Panic quickly replaced the quiet atmosphere that had filled the mansion only moments before. Medical assistance was requested without delay. Efforts were made to revive him as those around him realized the seriousness of the situation. The house that had once felt like a place of comfort suddenly became a scene of confusion and fear. Elvis was transported by ambulance to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. Doctors worked to save him, but despite their efforts, they were unable to bring him back. Later that day, Elvis Presley was officially pronounced dead. He was 42 years old. News of his death spread with incredible speed. Radio stations interrupted their regular programming. Television networks began covering the story almost immediately. Newspapers rushed to print special editions. Across the world, fans struggled to believe what they were hearing. Inside Graceland, however, the tragedy was far more personal. 9-year-old Lisa Marie Presley was at the mansion that day. According to various accounts, she had seen her father only hours before everything changed. Like any child, she could not have imagined that it would be the last time. As adults rushed through the house, Lisa found herself surrounded by confusion. The atmosphere around her changed suddenly. People moved quickly from room to room. Conversations became urgent, faces filled with worry. Years later, memories associated with her personal reflections suggested that certain images from that day never left her. She remembered adults running through the house and reacting to something she did not fully understand. She could sense that something terrible had happened, but nobody seemed able to explain it in a way a child could understand. The confusion only deepened as the hours passed. Lisa searched for answers. She watched the adults around her. She listened to fragments of conversations. Yet the full truth remained just out of reach. For a young girl, the events unfolding around her were difficult to process. The people she trusted were frightened. The house she loved felt unfamiliar. Nothing seemed normal anymore. Then came the heartbreaking realization. Her father was not coming back. The man who had carried her through Graceland, made her laugh, and treated her like the center of his world, was suddenly gone. At only 9 years old, she faced a loss that would shape the rest of her life. The grief that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced. While many children lose a parent in private, Lisa's pain unfolded in front of the entire world. Everywhere she looked, people were talking about Elvis. television stations covered his death continuously. Reporters gathered outside Graceland. Fans traveled to Memphis to mourn. Images of her father appeared on screens and newspaper pages across the globe. The world was grieving a legend. Lisa was grieving her dad. For millions, Elvis Presley was an icon whose music had changed history. For his daughter, he was the loving father she looked forward to seeing whenever she returned to Graceland. And as millions mourned Elvis Presley, Lisa Marie was left carrying a question that would linger for decades. Could her father have been saved? The IRS of grief. When Elvis Presley passed away in August 1977, the world focused on the loss of a music legend. Fans mourned across countries and generations. Newspapers filled their pages with tributes. Television stations replayed his performances. Yet behind the public grief was a young girl facing a future without her father. At only 9 years old, Lisa Marie Presley suddenly found herself connected to something much larger than she could fully understand. Following Elvis's death, she became a joint heir to his estate alongside her grandfather, Vernon Presley, and her great-grandmother, Minnie Mae Presley. At the time, the responsibility of managing Elvis's legacy did not fall on Lisa's shoulders. Vernon and Minnie Mae handled the estate while she continued growing up. They worked to preserve what Elvis had built and protect the future of his only child. For Lisa, however, no inheritance could replace what she had lost. The years following her father's death were difficult. Although she was surrounded by people who cared about her, the absence of Elvis remained a constant presence in her life. Every memory seemed connected to him. Every visit to Graceland reminded her of the father, who was no longer there. As she grew older, another challenge emerged. She was not simply Lisa Marie Presley. To the world, she was Elvis Presley's daughter. The comparison followed her everywhere. People wanted to know if she looked like him, sounded like him, or behaved like him. His fame continued to shape the way others saw her. No matter where she went, his shadow was never far behind. Living with that kind of attention was not easy. Most young people are allowed to discover who they are in private. Lisa had to do it while the public watched. As she entered her teenage years, she began experiencing fame on her own terms. Yet, even then, people remained fascinated by her connection to Elvis. The curiosity never disappeared. One memorable moment came in the late 1970s when Lisa attended her first rock concert. She watched the British rock band Queen perform at the Forum in Inglewood, California. After the concert, she met Freddie Mercury and gave him one of Elvis's scarves. It was a meaningful moment for a young girl whose life had always been connected to music. Despite experiences like these, happiness often existed alongside sadness. The years after Elvis's death brought emotional challenges that were difficult to escape. Lisa missed her father deeply. The grief she carried as a child did not simply vanish as she grew older. Instead, it became part of her life. Her home life also became more complicated. After Elvis's death, Priscilla Presley began a relationship with actor Michael Edwards. Years later, Lisa would speak publicly about painful experiences connected to that period of her life. These difficulties added another layer to an already challenging childhood. As a result, feelings of loneliness sometimes followed her. Accounts connected to her personal reflections suggest that she often thought about her father. Certain memories stayed close to her heart. The small moments seemed especially important. The time they spent together at Graceland, the feeling of being loved and protected, the simple conversations they never got the chance to continue. Rather than missing the superstar known around the world, she often seemed to miss the father she knew behind closed doors. There were likely moments when she wondered what advice he would have given her as she grew older. How would he have guided her through difficult situations? What would he have said during life's most important decisions? Those questions had no answers. In 1979, another loss arrived when Vernon Presley passed away. Then, in 1980, Minnie Mae Presley also passed away. With their deaths, Lisa eventually became the sole heir to her father's estate. Years later, when she turned 25 in 1993, she officially inherited the estate. By then, its value had grown significantly. Yet, even with that responsibility, the emotional burden remained far greater than the financial one. Keeping Elvis alive. For most people, grief slowly fades with time. The sharp pain softens, memories become gentler, and life moves forward. For Lisa Marie Presley, however, The loss of her father never truly disappeared. Decades after Elvis Presley's death, she continued carrying his memory with her every day. As she grew older, Lisa found herself facing an enormous responsibility. She was not only Elvis's daughter, she was also the guardian of his legacy. Millions of people around the world continued to love and admire him, and many looked to her as the person who would protect what he left behind. When Lisa turned 25 in 1993, she officially inherited her father's estate. By that time, the value of the estate had grown tremendously. The responsibility that came with it was far greater than money. She was now responsible for preserving one of the most famous names in entertainment history. One of the most important parts of that responsibility was Graceland. For fans, Graceland was a historic landmark. For Lisa, it was something much more personal. It was the place where she had spent time with her father. Every room carried memories. Every hallway reminded her of moments they had shared together. Protecting Graceland meant protecting a part of Elvis himself. Over the years, Graceland continued attracting visitors from around the world. People traveled long distances to see where Elvis had lived and to feel connected to his story. Through careful management of the estate and the Presley legacy, his influence continued to grow long after his death. As new generations discovered Elvis's music, his popularity remained strong. His image, recordings, and achievements continued reaching audiences who had never seen him perform in person. Decade after decade, his place in popular culture remained secure. Lisa played an important role in making sure that happened. Yet her efforts were never only about business. They were deeply personal. Behind every decision was a daughter who missed her father. One of the most emotional moments came in 1997. That year marked the 20th anniversary of Elvis's death. To honor him, Lisa participated in a special project involving his song, "Don't Cry, Daddy." Using Elvis's original vocal recording, new instrumentation was added, and Lisa contributed her own vocals. The result created a unique father and daughter duet across time. The video was presented during a tribute concert held on August 16th, the anniversary of Elvis's death. For many people, it was a touching tribute. For Lisa, it was something even deeper. It allowed her to connect with her father in a way few people could understand. Although he had been gone for many years, the bond between them remained strong. Throughout her life, Lisa also spoke about Elvis in interviews. While the world often focused on the legend, she frequently spoke about the man she knew as her father. The pain of losing him never completely faded. Time changed the way she carried her grief, but it never erased it. As the years passed, sadness became mixed with gratitude, memories, and love. The loss remained, but so did the connection. Accounts linked to her personal reflections suggest that she often viewed Elvis differently from the public. Many people saw a superstar, a performer, and a cultural icon. Lisa saw the father who made her feel safe, loved, and important. She appeared determined to preserve that side of him. She wanted people to remember more than the fame, the music, and the headlines. She wanted them to understand that behind the global phenomenon was a human being who cared deeply for his family. At the same time, certain questions never seemed to disappear completely. As she worked to preserve Elvis's memory, thoughts about his final years occasionally lingered in the background. Memories of Graceland, the doctors, the medications, and the changes she witnessed as a child remained part of her story. Some questions never found clear answers. Perhaps that is one reason her connection to her father remains so powerful. Love and loss often leave unfinished thoughts behind. Even so, Lisa never allowed those questions to define Elvis's memory. Yet, even after decades had passed, the story was not over. The grief she had carried since childhood remained buried beneath the surface. And then, tragedy struck again, reopening wounds that had never truly healed. The diary that reopened old wounds. For much of her life, Lisa Marie Presley carried a grief that began in childhood. The loss of her father shaped her in ways that never fully disappeared. Yet in her final years, another tragedy brought a fresh wave of heartbreak into her life. In July 2020, Lisa's son, Benjamin Keogh, passed away at the age of 27. The loss devastated her. Family members later described a grief so deep that it affected every part of her life. Benjamin was not only her son, he was someone she loved beyond words. Those closest to her watched the pain take hold. While Lisa continued moving forward, the sorrow remained with her every day. The loss reopened old wounds that had never completely healed after Elvis's death. Once again, she found herself facing a heartbreak that seemed impossible to understand. Despite her struggles, Lisa continued making public appearances. In January 2023, she attended the Golden Globe Awards with her mother, Priscilla Presley. The biographical film about Elvis had received multiple nominations, and the event brought attention back to the Presley family. It would become her final public appearance. 2 days later, on January 12th, Lisa suffered cardiac arrest at her home in Calabasas, California. Emergency responders arrived and provided medical assistance. They were able to restore a pulse before transporting her to a hospital. Doctors worked to save her, but later that same day, Lisa Marie Presley passed away at the age of 54. The news shocked fans around the world. For many people, it felt impossible to separate her story from that of her father. Once again, a member of the Presley family had been lost far too soon. Following her death, an autopsy determined that she passed away from a small bowel obstruction, caused by complications from a previous bariatric surgery. A toxicology analysis found opioids in her system, but they were not considered a factor in her death. As tributes poured in from across the world, attention turned once more to Graceland. A public memorial service was held there later that month. Family members, friends, and admirers gathered to honor her life. Millions more watched from afar. In a final connection to the people she loved most, Lisa was laid to rest in the Graceland Meditation Garden beside her son Benjamin and near her father, Elvis Presley. For many observers, the story seemed to come full circle. Then another deeply personal chapter emerged. Following her death, family members worked through her belongings and personal writings. Among them were reflections that offered a more intimate look into her memories and experiences. The writings revealed a woman who never stopped thinking about her childhood. She reflected on life at Graceland before her parents separated. She remembered the warmth of those early years and the happiness she felt when her family was together. The divorce that followed left a lasting impression on her, creating changes that remained with her long after childhood ended. The writings also returned to memories of Elvis's final years. She recalled doctors frequently coming and going from Graceland. She remembered seeing medications throughout the house. Tables covered with prescription bottles became part of the images she carried with her for decades. Certain memories appeared especially vivid. Adults seemed nervous. Conversations became guarded. Questions often went unanswered. In many ways, the similarities between their lives were impossible to ignore. Both lived under extraordinary public attention. Both struggled with profound grief. Both spent their lives surrounded by fascination from millions of people. Both passed away younger than many expected. Even after death, both remained connected to Graceland, the place that defined so much of their story. And perhaps most striking of all, both left behind unanswered questions.